The apartment was eerily silent. The only sound was the faint ticking of a clock on the wall, marking the seconds as they slowly slipped away. The dim light of the night flickered, casting shadows across the room, a stark contrast to the tension hanging in the air. Lisa Clark crouched beside her 6-year-old daughter's bed, her hand pressed tightly over little Amara's mouth, her heart pounding in her chest. Outside the apartment, the unmistakable sound of heavy boots echoed down the hallway, multiple sets, moving in sync. She had only seconds to act. Amara's wide, amber eyes stared up at her mother, full of fear, her tiny body trembling in Lisa's arms. In that moment, Lisa saw it, the same eyes. Her daughter's gaze was exactly like his, the man she had sworn to leave behind. The man she thought was lost to the shadows forever. The door frame splintered under the first hit. Lisa's body went cold as her phone buzzed in her pocket. She barely noticed the buzz. She knew what was coming. She reached for it, hands shaking, but this wasn't a moment to hesitate. The text that flashed on the screen made her stomach drop. "We know about the girl. You have 24 hours. Mommy." Amara whimpered, but Lisa held her tighter, pressing her small body against her chest. Her finger hovered over the phone, the name glowing on the screen like a beacon in the dark. She knew what it meant to call him. It meant everything would change. The door crashed open, and before Lisa could even make the call, a man stepped into the room. His silhouette was tall, broad, and hauntingly familiar. Taejun. Her heart whispered the name, but the words never left her mouth. Taejun was the man she had once loved, the man she had once believed would be her forever. He had been her world, until the night she had left him, leaving behind the violence, the secrets, and his shadowed past. She had made the decision when she found out she was pregnant. She couldn't raise her daughter in his world. His world was too dark. But now, everything was about to shatter. "I'm sorry, Lisa," he said, his voice a deep, calm rumble that carried the weight of years spent in a criminal underworld. "I try to keep this quiet, but you went too far. Your investigation, it's too dangerous. And now, they're coming for both of you." Tears welled in Lisa's eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not in front of Amara. She couldn't let her daughter see the fear that was ripping her apart. She had to protect her, no matter the cost. The second man stepped into the room, his face cold and unreadable. "We need to leave now," he said in perfect English, his eyes flicking to Amara. He wasn't part of the familiar world of Taejun, the world of shadows and power, but his eyes told Lisa that he was just as dangerous. Lisa's hand tightened around her phone, and she finally made the call. Her finger trembling, she dialed the number she had sworn she would never call again. The call rang through, loud and clear against the quiet room. "Hello?" came the voice on the other end, a voice that sent a chill down her spine. "Taejun," Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need you. I need you to come now." "Where are you?" the voice asked. "I'm in Atlanta. They found me. I don't know how much time we have." "I'll be there as fast as I can," the voice said, but there was something more in it, something personal. Lisa closed her eyes, the memories flooding her mind. She had left him to protect herself and Amara, but she had never really gotten over him. And now, she was pulling him back into this nightmare. As she ended the call, Taejun's eyes locked onto hers. There was something unspoken between them, something that had always been there, the bond that had once connected them in ways no one else could understand. "You made a mistake, Lisa," he said quietly, his voice rough with regret. "This wasn't your fight." "I didn't want it to be," Lisa replied, her voice hoarse. "But you didn't give me a choice." Before Taejun could respond, there was a loud knock at the door, the sound of metal on wood. The second man reached for the handle. "They're here." Taejun's gaze hardened. "You were always meant to be mine. And now you've brought Amara into this. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you both safe." Lisa's heart raced, her mind spinning with the weight of his words. Taejun, the man who once broke her heart, was now standing in front of her, vowing to protect her and her daughter. But in this world, promises like that didn't come free. And Lisa knew that the moment he stepped into her life again, everything would change. Amara tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, is he going to help us?" Lisa didn't know how to answer that. Instead, she knelt down and kissed Amara's forehead, whispering, "Stay close to me, baby. I promise we'll be safe." But inside, Lisa wasn't sure. Because as Taejun stepped closer, his hand brushing hers, she realized that the man she had tried to escape was the only one who could save them now. The sound of heavy boots moved closer, and Lisa's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text, but a call from an unknown number. She answered it on instinct, her voice tight. "What do you want?" "We know who you're talking to. You have 24 hours, or we'll make sure neither of you ever sees the light of day again." The voice on the other end was cold, calculating, and the threat was unmistakable. Lisa hung up without saying another word, her eyes meeting Taejun's, both of them realizing the same thing: time was running out. Subscribe to this channel to support our growth and stay tuned for what happens next. The heavy silence in the apartment was broken only by the distant rumble of a car engine somewhere outside. Lisa's phone still buzzed in her hand, the screen glowing faintly in the dim room. Taejun stood beside her, his posture tense, but there was an underlying sense of determination in his stance. He wasn't the man she once knew. The weight of his transformation over the past 6 years was palpable. He had become colder, harder, a man forged by shadows. "Get her ready," he ordered quietly, his eyes never leaving the door, as if waiting for it to break down at any moment. Lisa blinked, her gaze still locked on him. The man who had once stolen her heart with a single look, the man who had been both her strength and her downfall, now stood like a pillar of iron, ready to tear through whatever stood in his way. He was no longer the man who had made her laugh in the dim light of their apartment, whispering promises of a future that never came. He was someone else, someone dangerous, someone who could destroy everything in his path. "I don't think you realize how deep this goes," Lisa whispered, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and anger. "You left us, Taejun. You left me with nothing but a child and a promise that you'd never be part of our lives again." His jaw tightened, the muscle in his cheek twitching with a repressed emotion. "I never wanted to leave you."
"But you made me."
"And now your investigation, your work, it's put everything at risk." "I can't change the past, Lisa, but I can help you protect her now. That's all that matters." Lisa's gaze dropped to the floor, where Amara sat quietly, her tiny hands clutching the stuffed elephant that Taejun's men had retrieved from the apartment earlier. She was so innocent, so pure. She didn't deserve this, didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire of a life that had never truly been hers to begin with. Lisa's heart clenched. She had tried to keep her daughter away from the shadows of Taejun's world, tried to protect her from the monster he had become. But fate had a way of twisting everything. And now, the very man she had hoped to forget had reappeared, dragging with him the very chaos she had worked so hard to escape. "Lisa," Taejun said, his voice low but urgent. "We don't have time for this. We need to move." The floorboards creaked beneath his weight as he turned to leave the room, but Lisa stayed frozen, her thoughts spinning. How had they found them? How had they known about Maya? Her investigation had been careful, meticulous. She had been operating in the shadows, gathering evidence of an international human trafficking syndicate, trying to piece together the connections that had evaded everyone else. But she never thought it would lead here, to her doorstep, to her child being dragged into the mess of it all. Suddenly, Amara's small voice broke the silence, her words a soft whisper in the stillness of the room. "Mommy, I'm scared," she said, looking up at Lisa with wide, innocent eyes. "Will we be okay?" Lisa's breath hitched. The rawness in her daughter's voice made everything else fall away. She was just a little girl, caught in a nightmare that had nothing to do with her. Lisa knelt down beside her, brushing a lock of hair away from Amara's forehead. "We'll be okay, baby. I promise. We just need to be brave, okay? Can you do that for Mommy?" Amara nodded, her tiny hand gripping Lisa's tighter, as if trying to hold onto something, anything, solid in a world that was rapidly crumbling around them. But Lisa knew this was far from over. The danger wasn't just outside their door, it was everywhere. and it was closing in. Taejun returned to the room, his expression hard as stone. "We need to move. Now." "Where?" Lisa asked, her voice almost a whisper, a deep sense of dread settling in her stomach. She had no idea what he was thinking, what kind of plan he had, but it didn't matter. She knew she had no choice but to follow him. "We'll go to one of my safe houses. You'll be protected there." She didn't want to ask more questions. She didn't want to know where this safe house was or what he'd done to create it. Lisa had just nodded, glancing at Amara one last time before scooping her daughter into her arms. Her heart ached as the weight of the situation pressed down on her. She had made a decision long ago to keep her daughter out of this world. And now, the world was forcing its way into her life again, dragging them both back into the shadows. Taejun grabbed his phone and sent a quick message to someone, his fingers moving with practice speed. "I've already called for backup. We'll be in the air soon enough. But I need you to trust me, Lisa. I need you to trust that I'm doing everything I can to get you both out of this safely." Lisa looked up at him, her expression hard but her voice steady. "I don't trust you, Taejun. Not anymore." His eyes flickered with something, regret, perhaps, or anger, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he turned to the door, opening it slowly, his gaze sweeping the hallway beyond. The air felt thick, oppressive, like a storm waiting to break. "We don't have time for this," he muttered, stepping into the hallway. "Let's go." Lisa followed him, clutching Amara tightly to her chest. Every step they took felt like an eternity. They moved swiftly through the dark apartment, Taejun leading the way. But even with his strength, his cold precision, the fear in Lisa's heart only grew. When they reached the elevator, Taejun's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it quickly before shoving it back into his pocket. "They know we're moving. We need to get to the car before they reach us." Lisa's pulse quickened. The door to the apartment opened with a sudden, violent crash, and she turned to see two men in black suits storming into the apartment. "Move!" Taejun barked, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the stairs. The elevator was too slow. The footsteps of the men echoed down the hallway, growing louder, closer. Lisa's mind raced. The door to the stairwell slammed open, and they rushed down, the sound of their footsteps echoing through the building. It was too close now. She could feel the danger creeping up on them. The air was thick with tension, and every step felt like it might be their last. Outside, the rain had started to fall, soaking the streets in a cold, relentless downpour. The city felt distant now, like a place she didn't belong anymore. A black SUV waited in front of the building, its engine running low, the headlights cutting through the misty rain. As they neared the car, Lisa's phone buzzed again. Another message. "We know where you are. You have 30 minutes. Taejun slammed open the car door and shoved Lisa inside, her heart racing as the sound of gunshots echoed in the distance. "Move," he shouted to the driver, and they sped off, tires screeching as they disappeared into the night. Lisa held Amara close, her eyes locked on Taejun as the rain battered the windows of the SUV. She didn't know where they were going, or what would happen next. But she knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel and stay tuned for what happens next in this intense, dramatic story. The black SUV barreled through the streets of the city, the sound of the rain hammering against the windows like a constant, unforgiving reminder of the peril that lurked outside. Lisa clutched Amara tighter to her chest, her fingers trembling as the weight of the situation settled in. They were no longer safe. They were no longer hiding from the world. The world had found them, and it was closing in fast. Taejun sat across from them, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his face a mask of cold determination. He hadn't spoken much since they'd left the apartment, and Lisa didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified by his silence. His presence in her life had always been a paradox, a man she once loved, a man she had run from, and now, a man who was her only chance of survival. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, breaking the silence, her voice barely a whisper. His gaze flickered to her for a moment before returning to the darkened road. "A safe house. You'll be safe there for now." "For now," she repeated softly, her heart sinking. Taejun's eyes were sharp, alert, like a predator on the hunt. She could see the tension in his jaw, the way his grip tightened on the armrest as they drove through the night. The city passed by in a blur of neon lights and rain-soaked streets, but Lisa's mind was elsewhere. She couldn't shake the image of Maya's face, her innocent eyes filled with fear. The world was spinning out of control, and she was doing everything she could to keep her daughter safe. But at what cost? What do you mean by for now? Taejun? She pressed, her voice stronger this time, demanding an answer. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he picked up his phone and typed something quickly, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. The silence stretched between them like an uncomfortable cord. Lisa felt the weight of the unspoken words hanging in the air. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost a growl. There are things happening, things I can't control. But I will keep you safe, Lisa. I swear it. Things you can't control? She repeated, her voice rising. You've always been in control, Taejun. This isn't the man I knew. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Taejun didn't flinch at her accusation. He simply nodded, his eyes narrowing as they turned a corner onto a narrow street. The tension in the car was thick, suffocating, and Lisa couldn't help but wonder if he was telling her the truth. Was he truly trying to protect them, or was he just playing a dangerous game, one that she had no place in anymore? I didn't want this for you, Taejun said quietly, his voice tinged with something Lisa couldn't quite place. I never wanted this life for you, or Maya. But now it's too late. The world you're in now, it's part of you, whether you like it or not. The words felt like a slap, though they were laced with an underlying tenderness that Lisa hadn't expected. She stared at him, at the man she once knew, trying to reconcile the person who had been her love, her future, with the cold figure before her. The man who had built an empire on secrets and lies, the man who had chosen power over everything else. Don't tell me what I'm part of, she said sharply, her voice trembling with emotion. You don't get to tell me that. Taejun's lips parted, and for a split second, Lisa thought he might say something more, but the words never came. Instead, he just nodded, his gaze flickering back to the road ahead. Lisa couldn't help but feel the shift between them, the distance, the chasm that had grown between their worlds. She wasn't sure what she felt anymore. Anger, betrayal, fear, love. Too, perhaps, though it seemed so distant now, a feeling that had faded into the shadows of their past. The car slowed as they approached a large, nondescript building. It wasn't much, no grand security gates or flashing lights, but Lisa could sense the protection it offered. She could almost feel the walls closing in around them, locking them into this new reality that had been forced upon them. Here, Taejun said, breaking the silence once more. This is where you'll be safe. Lisa didn't respond. Instead, she looked down at Maya, who had fallen asleep in her arms, her little body curled up, her head resting against her mother's chest. She was so innocent, so pure, untouched by the darkness that had now surrounded them. Lisa's heart ached as she looked at her daughter's peaceful face. She would do anything to keep her safe, even if it meant confronting the man she had tried to forget. Taejun parked the car in front of the building, and the driver turned off the engine. The silence was deafening as they all sat there, waiting for the next move. Lisa's hand tightened around Maya, unwilling to let go, even as she knew that this was only the beginning of something much bigger than she could imagine. You don't have to do this, Taejun, Lisa said, her voice softer this time, almost pleading. You don't have to put us in the middle of your world. I've already put you in the middle of it, he replied, his tone hard but sincere. And I'm not going to let anything happen to you. Lisa nodded slowly, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She wanted to believe him, but how could she? This world he was a part of, it wasn't a world she could ever understand, let alone survive in. The car door opened, and Taejun stepped out, his movements smooth and calculated. He turned to face Lisa, offering her his hand. Let's go, he said simply. Lisa hesitated for a moment, but then, with a deep breath, she stepped out of the car, her heart racing. She was stepping into the unknown, and no matter how much she hated it, She had no choice. She had to trust him, for now. The building was cold inside, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows against the stark white walls. Taejun led them through a series of hallways, each one more sterile and impersonal than the last. Lisa couldn't help but feel a sense of dread settle in her stomach. This wasn't safety. This was containment. "Why didn't you tell me about Maya sooner?" she asked, her voice low, a tremor of emotion breaking through. Taejun's face remained impassive, but his eyes softened ever so slightly. "I didn't want to drag you back into this world. I thought I could keep her safe, keep you safe. But I was wrong." Lisa's breath caught in her throat. The realization hit her like a freight train. This wasn't just about protecting her daughter anymore. It was about his guilt, his regret, and his love, if that was still possible. They reached the end of the hallway, and Taejun stopped in front of a plain door. He turned to Lisa, his expression unreadable. "This is it," he said quietly. "You're safe here. I'll be in touch. Rest. You need to stay alert." Lisa nodded but didn't speak. She wasn't sure what to say. The silence between them was heavy, filled with the weight of years of unspoken words. As the door swung open and she stepped into the small room, she felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Lisa sat in the cold room, Maya curled up beside her, fast asleep, her small chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. The silence in the air felt suffocating, almost as if the very walls were closing in on her. The light from the single bulb overhead flickered intermittently, casting long, sharp shadows across the room. It felt like a temporary prison, a place where she could hide but never truly escape. For the first time in a long while, Lisa let herself breathe. She had done everything in her power to keep Maya safe. She had run, hidden, fought to protect her daughter from the dangerous world that seemed to be chasing them. But even now, with everything that had happened, she still felt the weight of her choices, the consequences of a past she couldn't outrun. It wasn't just about Simon or Sungho. It wasn't just about the dangerous men who had been after them. It was about the life she had built, the life she had tried so hard to keep separate from all of this. And now it was all crashing down around her. The door to the room opened, and Taejun stepped inside, his silhouette dark against the hallway lights. Lisa's heart skipped a beat as his eyes met hers. There was something different about him, an edge to his gaze, a coldness that hadn't been there before. The man who had once been her everything, the man who had been her refuge, now seemed like a stranger. He stepped forward, but Lisa didn't move. She wasn't sure what to say to him anymore. Everything had changed so quickly, and the walls between them seemed insurmountable. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice low, his eyes flickering to Maya's sleeping form before returning to her. Lisa didn't answer at first. Instead, she stared at him, taking in the harsh lines of his face, the tension in his shoulders. He looked like a man who had seen too much violence, too many choices that couldn't be undone. And she realized, in that moment, that they were no longer the same people they had been. The love they once shared had been overshadowed by everything that had happened. "I don't know what to do anymore," she said, her voice thick with emotion, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. "This isn't the life I wanted. You weren't supposed to be this man. I didn't expect this." Taejun's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to understand the emotions that had taken root in her heart. "I didn't want this for you, Lisa," he said, his voice hoarse, as if admitting something that had been buried deep inside for a long time. "I never wanted you to be part of this world. But I never expected you to walk away from me, from us." "Us," Lisa repeated softly, the words sounding foreign on her lips. "You think we can just go back to being us? You're not the same man I knew, Taejun. And I'm not the same woman who ran away from this world either. We can't just pretend that everything will be fine. You've built this empire on blood and lies. And now it's catching up to us." Taejun's eyes darkened, his face hardening. He had heard this before, but it didn't make the truth any easier to accept. I never wanted you to be caught up in this, he repeated, the pain in his voice evident. But the reality is, we don't have a choice anymore. You've seen too much. You've been exposed. They'll come for you, Lisa. And they'll come for Maya. Lisa stood up abruptly, her hands shaking as she wrapped her arms around herself. She felt vulnerable, exposed in a way that she hadn't since the first time she had left this life behind. Why now, Taejun? She asked, her voice cracking. Why come back now? After everything? After what we've been through? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved closer, closing the space between them. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, with the weight of the years that had passed. Lisa could feel the pull, the tension that had always existed between them. But this time, it felt different. It felt dangerous. You think I'm a monster, don't you? Taejun said quietly, his voice low and dangerous, as if daring her to admit the truth. You think I've changed, that I'm no longer the man you loved. Lisa's breath hitched, her heart racing in her chest. I don't know who you are anymore, she whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. Taejun's gaze softened, but the coldness never left his eyes. He reached out, his hand hovering near her, but he didn't touch her. He didn't need to. The distance between them was already too great to bridge. We don't have a choice, Lisa, he said, his voice steady, as if trying to convince himself more than her. The people after you, they won't stop until they have what they want. I can't let that happen. I won't let them hurt you. Lisa's mind was racing, her heart torn in every direction. She knew he was right. She knew they were running out of time. But the thought of returning to his world, to the darkness that had swallowed everything she had once believed in, was suffocating. Do you even remember who I am anymore? She asked, her voice rising, the frustration spilling over. Do you remember the woman you left behind? The woman who thought she could have a future, a life without all of this. Taejun's face hardened, his eyes narrowing. You think I didn't remember you? His voice was low, tinged with something raw. You think I didn't spend every day thinking about you, wondering if you were okay? But I couldn't protect you from this world. I couldn't protect you from what I've become. Lisa stepped back, her chest tight with emotion. You didn't just lose me, Taejun. You lost yourself. You became everything you swore you wouldn't be. And now I don't know who you are. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. Taejun didn't say anything. He simply stood there, his face unreadable, his jaw clenched tight. He had heard this before, but hearing it from her, hearing it from the woman he had loved, hurt in a way that nothing else had. You think you can protect me from this? Lisa asked, her voice barely a whisper. This life? You can't. It's too late. They're already coming for us. The silence between them was deafening. For a moment, it felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, something to break. You're right, Taejun said finally, his voice heavy. It's too late. But I'll be damned if I let them take you from me again. Lisa's breath caught in her throat as she looked up at him, seeing something different in his eyes, a vulnerability she hadn't seen in years. The man who had once been a cold, calculating kingpin now seemed broken. He reached for her, and this time, she didn't pull away. This time, she let him. The next few days were a blur for Simone. After the chaos of their escape, the world seemed to move in slow motion. The quiet of the safe house was suffocating. She had spent years avoiding this life, the shadows of her past creeping in on her in every corner, every creak of the floorboards. Now, here she was, trapped in a world she thought she had left behind. Taejun had been distant, his eyes clouded with thoughts Simone couldn't begin to fathom. She had expected anger, even bitterness. But what she hadn't expected was the guilt that seemed to gnaw at him constantly. The man who had once been her everything, the man who had built an empire on his power and ruthlessness, now seemed smaller, vulnerable. But the vulnerability she saw in him didn't make her feel sympathy. It made her feel conflicted. He wasn't the man she had once loved. He couldn't be. Still, her heart ached every time she saw him with Maya. It was the tenderness in his eyes when he looked at her, the way he hovered over her, as though trying to protect her from the very world he had built. And it was in those moments that she saw the man he could be, the man who had once smiled at her like they were the only two people in the world. But could she trust him again? Could she ever go back to that life? Could she risk their safety, risk Maya's safety, for the sake of a man who had betrayed her once before? Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Taejun entered, his face grim. He didn't look at her at first. His gaze was fixed on Maya, who was sitting on the floor, playing with her stuffed elephant. "Simone," he said, his voice quieter than usual, almost hesitant. "We need to talk." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she kept her eyes on Maya, watching her daughter's innocent laughter as she tried to make her elephant talk. The simple joy of that moment felt like a fleeting dream. "I've made some calls," Taejun continued, walking into the room and sitting down beside her. His hand rested on the arm of the chair, fingers tapping in a rhythm that told Simone he was nervous. She hadn't seen that before, nervousness. "We're getting closer to the people who did this. They'll be found." Simone didn't look at him. She couldn't. "And what happens then?" she asked, her voice calm but laced with something sharp, something bitter. "You'll just go back to being the man you were? The man who destroyed lives for power?" His face hardened. "You don't understand. This isn't about power anymore. It's about protecting you. Protecting Maya." Simone looked at him then, finally meeting his gaze. The coldness in his eyes had softened, but it was still there, lurking beneath the surface. "Protecting us?" she repeated, the bitterness in her voice rising. "You think you can protect us by going back to your empire? You think you can protect us by playing their game?" Taejun stood up, his hands clenched at his sides. "This isn't a game, Simone. This is my life. And I will do whatever it takes to keep you and Maya safe." Her breath hitched. She could see the truth in his eyes, the desperation that matched the pounding in her chest. She had seen this side of him before, years ago, when he had been ready to risk everything for her. But that was before she ran. Before everything fell apart. "Maya doesn't need your protection," Simone said, her voice cold. "She needs a father, not a king." Taejun's jaw tightened. He didn't respond at first, just stood there, his back to her, his shoulders heavy with the weight of the past. "I'm not asking you to understand," he said quietly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to trust me. Trust that I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." Simone swallowed the lump in her throat. The man standing before her wasn't the man she had left behind all those years ago. The man standing before her was a father, a man broken by the choices he had made. But she couldn't forget what he had done, the empire he had built on bloodshed, on lies. Could she trust him again? Could she risk everything for the man who had shattered her heart once before? The door opened with a soft creak. Maya stood there, looking at them both with wide, innocent eyes. She didn't know the weight of the world Simone and Taejun carried on their shoulders. All she knew was that her parents were together again, and that, for now, was enough. Simone stood up, her gaze softening as she looked at her daughter. Maya's innocent joy was the only thing that mattered in that moment. She would do anything to protect her. She would go to hell and back for her. "I'll protect her," Taejun said, his voice rough, his eyes filled with determination. "I promise." Simone looked at him, her gaze steady. She didn't know if she could believe him, but she knew one thing for sure. She couldn't do this alone. "We'll find them," she said, her voice firm. "We'll find the people who did this, and we'll make them pay." Taejun nodded, his hand moving toward hers, but Simone didn't reach for it. Not yet. There was still too much distance between them, too many unanswered questions. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like they were fighting for something together. Maya tugged at her sleeve, her small fingers pressing into her arm. "Mommy, are you okay?" Simone smiled down at her daughter, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "I'm fine, baby. We're going to be fine." But even as she said the words, a dark feeling settled in her chest. This wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The night felt like it would never end. Simone sat at the edge of the bed, her fingers tapping nervously on the wood. She could hear the wind outside, howling through the mountains, but the silence inside the safe house was louder, more oppressive. Taejun had been pacing for the last hour, his movements quick and agitated. The tension between them had only grown, the question of whether they could ever truly rebuild what had been lost hanging in the air like an insurmountable mountain. Maya was asleep on the couch, her little body curled up in the blanket Simone had wrapped around her. For the first time in days, she seemed at peace. The nightmares had stopped, and the constant fear that haunted her wide amber eyes seemed to have faded, if only for a moment. But Simone couldn't rest. She couldn't stop thinking about what came next. The city was changing, and so was the man sitting across from her. Taejun had gone from a king in the shadows to a father fighting for his family, but would it be enough? Could he ever truly walk away from the life that had shaped him, the life that had almost killed them all? Simone's eyes flickered to the phone on the table. The burner phone had gone silent since Taejun's last call. She didn't know what was worse, the silence or the constant buzzing of her own thoughts, telling her that nothing would ever be the same. Maya's right, Taejun suddenly said, breaking the silence, his voice low and heavy with emotion. I do look like her, don't I? Simone looked up at him, startled. He was standing at the window, his back to her, the dim light of the moon casting shadows across his face. He hadn't looked at her like that in a long time, vulnerable, unsure, a man who had been brought to his knees by the weight of his choices. You've always had her eyes, she said softly, standing up and walking toward him. But you never had the chance to be the man she needed. Taejun turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers, full of regret. I'm trying to be that man now. Simone shook her head, her heart pounding. You can't just decide to be someone else after everything that's happened, Taejun. You can't just erase your past. The words felt like they had been building inside her for years. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal. Everything that had been buried beneath the surface was finally spilling out. But even as she spoke, she knew that there was more to it than just anger. There was fear. Fear that she had made a mistake by letting him back into their lives. Fear that she was setting them up for another fall. Taejun took a step toward her, his expression softening. I can't change what I've done. But I can change who I am now. I can choose to fight for you, for Maya. Simone's breath caught in her throat, the weight of his words pressing down on her chest. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that the man standing before her could be the father Maya deserved, the man who could protect them both. But the reality was darker. The Mafia had never let go of their hold on him, and even if Taejun had burned his empire, it wouldn't be enough to keep the ghosts from coming for him. A knock at the door startled them both. Taejun's hand immediately went to the gun hidden in his waistband, but Simone stopped him. Stay calm, she whispered, her voice steady despite the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Let me handle this. She moved to the door, her heart racing as she peered through the peephole. A man stood outside, his face partially obscured by a hood, but his posture was unmistakable. He was one of Taejun's men, someone she hadn't seen in years. A ghost from the past, sent to deliver a message. I've been sent by Kim Young-gi. The man's voice came muffled through the door. It's urgent. We need to talk. Simone's pulse quickened. She turned back to Taejun, who had already moved closer, his hand resting on the doorframe. Do you trust him? She asked. Taejun's eyes narrowed. I trust Kim Young-gi, but that doesn't mean we should let him in. Not without knowing what this is about. Simone nodded, stepping back from the door. She turned to the man outside, her voice firm. You can tell me what this is about here. No one comes in until I know why. There was a long pause before the man responded. We've found them, he said. The people who took Maya. They're not far. But there's a catch. They want something in return. Simone felt her blood run cold. She looked at Taejun, her mind racing. What do they want? The man's voice dropped to a whisper. You. Simone's heart stopped. She had never felt more exposed than she did in that moment. Her mind screamed at her to walk away, to protect Maya from whatever was coming, but she knew she didn't have that luxury anymore. She had spent too many years hiding from the world that Taejun had brought her into, and now, the world had come knocking at their door. Taejun moved to the door, his jaw clenched in determination. "Tell them I'll come," he said, his voice low and steady. "But no one touches Simone or Maya. Not while I'm alive." The man's voice hesitated before responding. "Understood, sir. But be careful. They know you. And they know what you'll do to protect your family." Simone felt a wave of nausea wash over her. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something deeper, something that threatened to swallow them whole if they didn't act fast. Taejun turned to Simone, his expression unreadable. "Stay here," he said, his voice low but commanding. "I'll handle this." She wanted to argue, to beg him to stay, but she knew better. Taejun had made his choice. He would go to them. He would face the danger head-on, just as he had always done. But this time it would be different. Because this time he had something to lose.